Bad news for Democrats, and they only have themselves to blame. I've talked about this in a couple of videos, but the way the media has structured things and the way the media thrives, if you've watched my video just a moment ago where I kind of talked about how they thrive off of negative stories and outrage, spells out a terrifying future for Democrats. In one video I made a couple days ago, I talked about how Avenatti was smeared by Time Magazine according to him. He demanded Time Magazine release the true context of his statement about a white male. He said something like a white man should be the Democratic frontrunner for the nominee. This was really, really bad for him. Democrats came out and attacked him and said he shouldn't have said this, and he claimed it was a smear job. Here's the thing. Donald Trump calls the press the fake news, okay? And his supporters can see the holes in these stories and eschew the media for the most part. Maybe not for the most part, but to a certain degree. That means when the media says something bad about Trump, his supporters are primed to reject it because they don't trust them. Media trust is down across the board. But the Democrats, they are the ones who are willing to throw someone out over a single infraction. And the media wants to smear everybody. They want that negative story. So when the media puts out a negative story about a Democrat, the Democrats have no defense because they're the ones saying Trump is wrong. Defend the press, respect the press. And then when the press says Michael Avenatti made a racist statement, what's he going to do? Call the media fake news? Sorry, it won't work this time because you're on the other side of things. This spells bad news for the future of the Democrats. But here we have a story from today. This is from the Federalist. More voters blame media than Trump for political division. More registered voters think members of the news media are to blame for political divisions in America than think President Donald Trump is to blame, according to a new Morning Consult Politico poll. It's a fairly balanced, Politico is not, far left, far right, or anything like that. Of the 2,543 voters surveyed last week and early this week, amid news about the package bombs and the deadliest anti-Semitic shooting in U.S. history, a majority of voters said the press has done more to divide Americans than Trump has. 64% of respondents said the news media has done more to divide than unite the country since Trump was sworn into office, while 56% of voters said the same about President Trump. Republican women cast the most blame on the press, with 83% saying media has done more to divide Americans than unite. Democratic men had the most favorable view of the news media, with 44% saying the press has done more to divide than unite. Democratic women were among the most critical of Trump, with 92% saying the president has done more to divide than unite. Only 21% of Republican men surveyed thought Trump has been more divisive than unifying. And I have to say, I actually lean towards Trump being more divisive. But I don't think it's, is it really about who's worse? I don't think so. I think Trump can be divisive, but overwhelmingly I blame the media. And I wonder if this is where people find themselves in the culture war. It's not really a left versus right thing. You have people who trust the media, you have people who don't. I find there are a lot of people who are on the left, who are far left, who have kind of removed themselves from the entirety of the culture war. These are like the libertarian, anti-war leftists of Occupy before they got pushed out by the identitarians. These people kind of don't fit into any of these narratives because they oppose the media. They think the media is lying, but they don't like Trump. I'm in like a similar position, but I'm kind of more mainstream than these fringy activists. Some of them have moved to the identitarian spectrum. Some of them just kind of gave up. Some of them have been banned even. Well, we'll continue on in a second. I've got more. We'll talk more about the media. The results come amid numerous media personalities having been blaming President Trump for the Tree of Life synagogue tragedy in Pittsburgh, where 11 people lost their lives. So, I have the poll. This is the data. This is a huge PDF. It's 300 pages going through all of the data. There's a lot more than just media approval here. But I have this story from Time that I think is particularly relevant, having to do with the conversations that have been emerging recently, questions about whether or not the media is the enemy of the people. What I want to say, going back to the point I was making about the culture war and where you find yourself. I am on the left. I am a social liberal. And that's really easily defined. Wikipedia really clearly defines it. And I think it's a great example. They say basically that I am in favor of market economies, but I believe the government should play a role in healthcare, education, and welfare. To what extent is debatable. I think we have corruption in our welfare system. I think we have corruption in our education system. I think we have corruption in all of these aspects that need to be fixed. But I do believe the government can play a role in these things in a social safety net, and that makes me a social liberal. Putting me center-left, why then do I find myself constantly ragging on Democrats and so rarely ragging on Republicans? The answer is actually really simple. The Republicans, for the most part, are doing the same thing they've always done, and I would expect nothing less. Seriously. They advocate for a lot of this, like Ben Shapiro is your typical conservative voice that I've heard throughout my whole life, religious, pro-life, etc. And what am I going to say? He's a guy with opinions that I've never agreed with. And am I going to constantly make videos where I complain about people who I never agree with in the first place? Or, for me, what I find is that I am particularly emotionally triggered by the left that is trying to cast me out of the only place I think actually makes sense in terms of my politics. There are no, I'm looking at Democrats embracing identitarianism, and I feel like that's a betrayal of the values of equality and liberty that social liberals were supposed to be protecting. I don't trust the media necessarily. Don Lemon goes on a racist, rant numerous times, and I find myself in a position where I'm at odds with identitarianism and the far left, but there are a lot of people who think Donald Trump is the worst of the worst, he's literally Hitler and things of this nature. And I think it may be just because they believe the mainstream media uncritically. They just listen to it and they say they think it's true. And I think this is maybe not the core issue pertaining to where you find yourself in the culture war, but it's a very strong defining factor. They say the left can't meme. Well, I think it's that those who can't meme will find themselves on the left, but there's a relation here. If you can't meme, it's because you're not engaging critically with the ideas and sharing and taking part. The same can be true for media. It means you're likely just sitting back and watching the media. This is why the NPC meme was so apt for so many people. And you have these people on the left saying it's a pro-Trump meme. It's not. I'm not pro-Trump. And everybody who watches me knows that. I'm like, I lean more towards not liking him for the most part. But I think credit is deserved where things, are deserving. A lot of people have argued me that he isn't deserving of the economy and things of that nature. And it's Obama who did that. Sure, whatever. The point is, if he does something good, I'm not going to get emotionally triggered to the point where I ignore what's going on and just blindly believe the media when they put out, 90% of the stories about Trump are negative. So I feel like people who are critical thinkers are going to find themselves at odds with the prevailing narrative. And this is why you might find leftists on a certain side of the culture war, because I know many. I know people who used to be hardcore regressives who kind of said, hey, wait a minute, this isn't working, and have stepped back and started challenging what's being put out in the media. And another thing can be said about those who find themselves red-pilled versus woke is that for many people, it's when they see the lies about themselves in the media, lies about things they believe in, when they say, whoa, wait a minute, you're lying about me. So look, did Donald Trump say that the press is the enemy of the people? Technically no, but also technically yes, because I want to point out this tweet they have highlighted from February 17th. He said the fake news media, parentheses, failing NY Times, NBC News, ABC, CBS, CNN, is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people. Now, people who support Trump will see this a certain way. It's not necessarily these organizations, but there are elements within them who put out fake news. And that's fair. And the people on the left take it extremely literally, where they view it as a collective. Everything within the New York Times, everything within NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN are the fake news and enemy of the people. Personally, I disagree with Donald Trump's framing of this. I understand many people might take it a certain direction and support him because they think they know what he's trying to say with this. In my opinion, NBC, ABC, and CBS are fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. For the most part, they do a really great job. CNN.com, fine. And I'll use CNN.com, but I won't watch CNN anymore because Don Lemon is a terrible person. And New York Times, I think, is overwhelmingly good, but I do take issue with some of their practices, and I really take issue with the hiring of Sarah Jeong, who I believe is an overt racist, and they're just running defense for her. So they say, the Quinnipiac also reveals a poll that 44% of American voters are concerned that Trump's criticism of the news media will lead to violence against people who work in media. Absolutely don't think so. 52% of voters are not worried. We did see those packages get sent out. And that is fair to say. I wouldn't say it was inspired by Trump because this guy was crazy and we've known he's got a criminal history. But I will say that Donald Trump is the reason he targeted them. Is it Donald Trump's fault? In no way is it Trump's fault. Crazy people gonna crazy, right? You can't blame Trump for that. And you can't blame Trump for taking issue with people who write fake news stories. This guy was crazy. He got his targets probably from being a Trump fan, but in no way is it anything having to do with Trump, because you could say the same thing about literally any crazy person. I'm not going to blame Bernie Sanders for his supporter going out and committing those acts. People say, oh, but Trump is advocating for these things. Yeah, and Hillary Clinton called for incivility, and people are calling for pushback. No one is innocent. You got to back off and say, listen, we're going to call out our people when they deserve to be called out, and we're going to recognize we're not perfect, and then everyone should be called out. The point is, what do we have here? Democrats and Republicans showed stark difference in concern for the issue. 76% of Democrats saying they're concerned about violent retaliation, while 80% of Republicans said they were not. And it's funny that Democrats feel this way, and I disagree with them. And I think this has to do with my experience on the ground. Hence, if you trust the media or not. Because I have seen the far left beat people. I have never seen the far right beat journalists. It's always Antifa. It's mind-numbing to me, but the reality is I'd have to assume these people aren't actually seeing what's going on because they're only turning on CNN in passing or hearing it at an airport and not actually looking into what happens. I asked my dad, Dad, did you know that a GOP headquarters was shot up in a drive-by? He said no. Did you know a GOP headquarters was set on fire by arsonists? He said no. And I said, I wonder why that is. But you certainly heard about these packages that were sent out because it was a high-profile story. I'm not going to blame the media for that. It was a huge story. But why aren't these other stories making it to the top? It's because the news media, they want the big press, and sometimes they're forced into covering things. And if they're not going to be forced into covering this and they think their audience won't care, they won't. And so there's a skewed vision of what's actually going on. Hence, Democrats are concerned about violent retaliation against the media. Why? When has a Trump supporter ever put on a black mask and started shoving, and attacking journalists? Maybe it's happened. I don't know. Link in the comments if it has. I've never seen it, and I've been on the ground at all these places. I've been on the ground at numerous right-wing events and Trump rallies, and not once has anyone ever done anything violent to me or near me or insulted me in any way. That's it. But you go to these protests, and the far left have smashed cameras, have stolen cameras, and that's just a damn fact. So I feel like when it comes to the fake news, when it comes to the enemy of the people, I don't think it's fair to say the press is the enemy of the people. I will say there are elements within the media that must be cleaned out, and the corruption needs to be stopped because it does exist. Fake news literally does happen. I am working on a massive story right now, maybe for tomorrow, where I believe the media is pumping up fake news. 100%. And I've reached out to numerous journalists asking, can you prove what you're saying? Do you have confirmation? There is no confirmation of what you're claiming to be true, but you're asserting it as a fact, as a factual news story, and they don't respond. They don't respond. So I take issue with a lot of these companies, but I certainly don't think NBC, ABC, and CBS are all that bad. I don't like CNN. The New York Times is pretty good too. But I disagree with Trump singling out these specific news organizations. And, it is what it is. I disagree with Trump on a lot of his rhetoric. I do think there are problems that should be called out when he talks about the media the way he does. But then I got to point out this. As much as I disagree with Trump using this language, even if he's the president, he has free speech. With great power comes great responsibility. So this is why I tend to disagree with his use of this language. But Jim Acosta then comes out circle jerking himself about the defenders of freedom and all that. And it's like, dude, you're not doing yourself any favors, Jim Acosta. Come on, man. Calm down. Trump's going to say what he's going to say. Stop talking about yourself and what he's doing to you. And then Jim Acosta posts a picture of a guy flicking him off. Oh, I'm sorry, someone flicked you off. I've been physically attacked, like 5 or 6 times in the past couple of years. And the only reason the number is so low is because I'm particularly good at running really fast. And as a skateboarder, I have agility. And I've avoided physical attacks in many instances. But I get threats from these people. So by all means, sure, people shouldn't flick you off. But they're legally allowed to do it. And poor you, so what? Try going out on the ground and covering some of this far left stuff and getting a bike lock to the head, getting mortars and M80s thrown at you, having people post pictures of your mom and threaten you. So you know what? As much as I can criticize Trump for saying these things, Jim Acosta's not doing anybody any favors. I'm going to stop before I go on a huge rant. Thanks for hanging out. Stick around. More videos coming up tomorrow on the main channel, youtube.com/Timcast. Yes, that is my main channel. This one just says Timcast because YouTube does it that way. Don't ask me why. This is Timcast News, but I'll see you all tomorrow.